Hello and welcome to week 5 of this rainy season garden journal thing. This is a bit of a short one because even more so than last week, it's been very hot, very dry, and I have been busy elsewhere, so I haven't had much time in the garden. So I thought it would probably be an ideal time to talk about what I'm actually doing. So sort of like 5 weeks in, let's do the introduction. This is a truly inspired idea, I'm sure. First off, where we are. We're in Zambia, which is a country in South Tropical Africa. We are sometimes grouped into Southern Africa, sometimes into Eastern Africa, sometimes into Central Africa, but we're really just this weird little belt with Malawi and Angola that doesn't quite fit in any of the classic groupings. We are a subtropical country by climate because we're quite high altitude. Most of our rainfall over most of the country is only really during the African monsoon. The rest of the year, basically, our altitude is such that most rain off the sea can't get up high enough, and our temperatures and our vegetation isn't enough to generate rainfall by itself. It is, for Southern Africa, a very wet country. We receive across the country roughly around 600 millimeters to, I guess, about 1200 or more millimeters up in the far north. Those are not exact figures. You will find lower and higher, I am sure, in different parts of the country. But that's the general range most places are going to fall within inside Zambia. Most of Zambia is within the Zambezi Basin, which is what the country takes its name from, and parts of it are in the Congo Basin, which feeds the largest river in Africa, and the river you could sink Liechtenstein in, just for anyone who thinks there's no rain or rivers flowing in Africa. But we only get rain for about 5 months of the year. It does create some gardening challenges because it means for 7 months of the year we are bone dry, and then for 5 months of the year we are often very waterlogged once the rain actually sets in. This is again in an ideal year when we have a good rainy season. Last couple of weeks have been much drier. Adding to that sort of very sharp seasonality, our soils tend to be fairly nutrient deficient, which creates a very fungally dependent woodland, which is the Miombo woodland. In Miombo woodland, effectively the most consistent defining feature is that it's dominated by Brachystegias or similar Julbernardias or Isobalinias. This far south in Zambia, it's mostly Brachystegias. You don't really see much Isobalinia down here. As far as I know, that's mostly north of Kabwe, where everything tends to get a lot wetter and a lot more tropical. What I want to do really is just build up the soil and start encouraging a much wider range of the Miombo trees to start coming up, because through agriculture, through just clearing and keeping the soils open and exposed, a lot of the soil's fertility has become very limited. And so I want deep-rooted trees bringing nutrition up, but I also want them sheltering the soil, and I want the soil building, because I believe that I can actually get a much wider range of native and non-native fruit trees and perennial vegetable crops growing if I can basically improve the soil and shelter it. So more or less, to summarize, I'm trying to create a combination of native woodland and fruit forest, more or less. Without diving too much into family history, suffice to say that there is a head start on the fruit forest in that there are several hundred mango and guava trees, as well as a select few of other fruit trees such as jackfruit and various citrus around the property that have been here since well before I was born. Many of these were planted using sort of European standards, so they tend to be straight lines of single species, which is great if your big risk is pollination. But when you're in a tropical climate, especially when you have healthy pollinator populations, your main problem with that is disease transmission, because you have year-round transmission and year-round activity of a lot of pests which just hop from food to food to food to food, so you're creating a buffet. So by boosting diversity, by having native trees in amongst that, by having a more chaotic arrangement of of different fruiting trees, I shouldn't actually reduce pollination significantly, because we do have such healthy pollinated populations compared to, for example, Europe. It has gone down within my lifetime, certainly in Zambia, but it is still somewhat mind-boggling when you compare it to most situations in, for example, Western Europe, which have insects in a very, very different way to the way the tropics have insects. So I more or less want to stabilize our insect populations or boost our insect populations. So there are no chemicals going in here. I avoid all chemicals. The closest I come to actual fertilizer is every now and then I get given horse manure, and that goes in around fruit trees usually. But I don't put fertilizer. I don't put pesticides. I don't put herbicides. Everything is as chemical free as possible. So I want to achieve pest limitation and pollinator sort of maximization, as well as really boosting up the soil and just creating a hyper-dense, carbon-rich environment, complex spaces, more or less. So, but by having as many layers of vegetation as I can, I think I can create the most complex possible space, which is the maximum possible habitat for the maximum number of different invertebrates, but also the maximum possible space for generation of food and sinking of carbon. And as everything gets chopped off and dropped onto the soil and left, rather than piled up into a compost heap, you don't get the anaerobic decomposition you would get in a compost heap. You tend to get a lot more fungal decomposition, which actually holds the carbon in the soil much better than if you were to rot it for sort of nitrates in a compost heap. I'm basically just trying to create complex spaces, and we'll see how that goes, I guess. So this was a bit of a weird, rambly one. Not really sure where it went in the end, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next Tuesday.